In this very in-depth forecast, the Ohio Valley is currently being monitored for severe weather, as scattered severe storms could bring a conditional risk for isolated tornadoes, isolated damaging wind gusts, and scattered large hail. Everything you need to know here on Gladiator WX. Hello everyone, welcome back to another weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for November 18th of 2025. For today, we have a slight risk for extreme southern Illinois, extreme southeastern Missouri, and northeastern Tennessee, as well as western Kentucky northwestern Tennessee, with a much larger marginal risk that extends across a great portion of northern Tennessee there, over a great portion of Kentucky, southern Indiana, and southern Illinois. Risks for today include a 2% tornado risk for mostly the southern half of that marginal risk, including the slight risk region, a 5% damaging wind gust risk for some of the storms, for the possibility of some isolated damaging wind gusts, as well as a 15% hail risk for the probability of some scattered large hail. For tomorrow, we do have a marginal risk for Texas, mostly western Texas into central Texas, and portions of extreme southern Oklahoma and portions of extreme eastern New Mexico. For risk for tomorrow, we don't really have all that much of a tornado or damaging wind gust risk, but we do have a 5% hail risk for that marginal risk region. I think there is the possibility that this might be upgraded to a 2% tornado risk in some areas. I do think that there is the probability of a conditional tornado risk for an isolated tornado or two across this region. Again, conditional risk. I definitely don't think the tornado risk is zero. But there might be a tornado risk added sometime tomorrow. I'm not really sure. Models are predicting storms to fire a lot earlier than we thought they were going to when we were looking at them on the weekly overlook with our long-range models, predicting them firing sometime on the 20th. However, by the time our convective allowing models got into range, they were showing convection firing like a day earlier, right as that trough is just barely getting into this region, with opposed to our long range models on the weekly overlook showing storms firing when our trough was well within that area. So definitely some issues with timing, and that's definitely leading to overall a lower risk for severe thunderstorms compared to what we were initially thinking on the 20th. But that's probably better for this region, given the fact that, severe thunderstorms in the middle of November just doesn't really seem to line up. And then for our day 3 outlook, don't really have any areas for severe thunderstorms. Then for our day 4 to day 8 outlook, we don't really have anything issued. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast for today, we do have a marginal risk for that region for severe thunderstorms for today, extending across West Virginia down into that slight risk region. And then we also have a slight risk for flash flooding for portions of western Arizona and portions of extreme southern Nevada there. So definitely make sure that you're looking out for that risk for flash flooding. We're not going to cover the risk for flash flooding in today's forecast, but if you do live in that region, definitely make sure you're paying attention to the risk for flash flooding. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk region for the southern portion of that marginal risk for severe thunderstorms, mostly along the Great Bend region of Texas, along the border there, extending down into Mexico, with a marginal risk for flash flooding extending up into southern Oklahoma and western Arkansas, with a marginal risk as well for Arizona into portions of extreme southern Nevada in the border of California there, and then as well for central into southern and southwestern New Mexico. Then for our day 3 outlook, we do have a much larger slight risk area for flash flooding for southern Missouri, Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma into central Texas, with a marginal risk extending across a great portion of the central into southern plains, and then even into the eastern half of the United States for Tennessee, Kentucky, southern Indiana, and southern Illinois, and then a marginal risk for coastal southern California there. And then for winter weather outlooks, we don't really have all that much of a concerning risk for snowfall, mostly just some heavy snowfall and some for some elevated regions of the Rockies there, but we don't really, we're not really going to see all that much of a risk for heavy snowfall anywhere else in the United States that can be that much of a threat. Taking a look at our 500 millibars and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, our storms are going to be initiating off of a shortwave trough that is currently moving through the region, with strong mid-level flow across the slight risk and marginal risk regions that is going to strengthen over time as we see the afternoon hours, with right now, or around this time, flow that's mostly around 50 knots, potentially even approaching 55 knots in some regions, and that's going to strengthen to probably about just upwards of maybe 60 knots in some regions, but mostly around that 50 to 60 knot range. Pretty decent mid-level flow, definitely going to help with quite a bit of shear, and that's what our storms are going to be firing off of. Taking a look at our 850 millibars or a low-level jet and how this can affect our risk for tornadoes for today, we have a really nice low-level jet across this region. Definitely going to lead to some decently curved photographs and quite a bit of a directional shear with 850 millibar flow out of the south east with a 850 millibar flow mainly around the 40s to 45 knots, potentially even getting, or mostly ranging around 35 to 45, but some areas seeing 40 to 45 knots of 850 millibar flow. Really nice flow of the jet. Definitely going to see quite a bit of directional shear, so that's not really going to be all that much of a problem as far as the tornado potential goes. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how this can affect our shear and our risk for hail mostly. We do have some really strong, really fast 200 millibar flow across the risk for severe thunderstorms across that marginal slight risk region. With 200 millibar flow that is definitely strengthened compared to yesterday. 200 millibar flow upwards of 90, the upper 90s to even 100 in some areas. Definitely going to lead to some pretty nicely elongated photographs and definitely a risk for hail across this region. Taking a look at our storm relative felicity or directional shear and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes for today, we have really strong 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative felicity across this region with storm relative helicity values getting upwards of 200. I think even approaching 300 in some areas. That could be further off to the west. This color table is really hard to read. I wish it had more numbers. But really nice storm relative felicity values regardless. Definitely going to be supportive of that risk for tornadoes across this region. But the main limiting factor, as I've been talking about on my Twitter page and my other social medias, and just generally what I've seen, is our mainly limiting factor, or most limiting factor for the potential for tornadoes for today is going to be our surface-based cape. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to affect our risk for hail for today, we have some really nice bulk shear across this region, with the majority of storms mostly being around here, majority of robust storms mostly being around the Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri border. That's where the majority of our, again, robust storms are going to be, so thus more concentration for the potential of hail, but regardless, really nice bulk shear values with 30 to 30, like mostly around the 30, even approaching the mid 30 knots in some regions. Again, really nice shear. Definitely going to be supportive of the potential for some scattered large hail. Taking a look at our reflectivity, we're actually going to go to live radar for this one because storms have already fired. I was a little bit late getting home, so storms have already had time to fire. However, you can definitely see that seems like the ARRR or an ARRR similar models were correct about where storm placement was going to be, where storms are going to fire. Storms mostly firing along the southern Illinois, Kentucky, southern Indiana border, so mostly in that slight risk region, with storms mostly being further down in the south, opposed to if they were further up north, they'll have the potential to tap into more instability that's going to be further down to the south, while also being a really nice area for shear as well. With that really nice low-level jet. So definitely going to see the potential for an isolated tornado or two coming out of these cells. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our instability and our risk for severe thunderstorms, we're going to see a warm sector that's only going to extend like partially into our risk for severe thunderstorms, with temperatures mostly around the 60s to the mid 60s within that slide risk region, and extending into portions of the marginal risk. It's definitely not going to extend into the rest of the marginal risk. However, any storm that is within the slight risk region is definitely going to be tapping into those 60 to 65 temperature regions, and definitely going to be nicely in the warm sector. I did skip ahead and I did look at our dew points. We have some decent dew points. The main limiting thing when it comes to our surface-based instability and our limited risk for tornadoes across this region is mostly our lapse rates, with our lapse rates being rather weak. It's supporting or it's dampening our instability, our surface-based instability, leading to less of a risk for tornadoes, but definitely a non-zero risk for tornadoes given some decent dew points, some decent temperatures, which we'll look at our dew points here in a moment. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability and our risk for severe thunderstorms, we have some really nice dew points across this region with dew points that are at least getting into the 45s for the rest of the marginal risk region, but 50 dew points for the rest of the marginal risk region. Our 60-degree dew point tongue is at least going to be stretching across the entirety of the slight risk region. So definitely going to see some decent, most unstable cape there, given our nice temperatures and our nice dew points. Again, our lapse rates are going to be a bit limiting, but we shouldn't really see too many problems when it comes to dew points or temperatures. Taking a look at our lapse rates, what we're looking at here is these orange circles. Those are our lapse rates that are going to be above 7. Anything above 7 is considered decent. Anything like 8 or 9 or higher, really decent lapse rates. However, across the risk for severe thunderstorms, we don't really have any lapse rates at all that are going to be getting up to the level of 7. So definitely going to be dampening our risk for severe thunderstorms a little bit, because it's going to be dampening our instability. Also dampening our risk for hail just a bit, but we do have really, really good shear across this region, really good speed shear. So that will make up for the lack of stronger lapse rates. But regardless, with the lack of strong lapse rates, it's going to be leading to a bit more dampened surface-based instability. So dampening our tornado risk just a bit. Taking a look at our cloud cover and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms. We do have a couple of areas where it is going to be sunny across this region. However, further to the northern end of that slight risk region, we do have a bit thicker cloud cover with some thicker high-level clouds, some thicker mid-level clouds, but some party low-level clouds. So not really, cloud cover shouldn't really be too much of an issue when it comes to our risk for severe thunderstorms. Shouldn't really be affecting our lapse rates too much. The fact that our lapse rates are being affected so heavily is mostly because of our lower temperatures at the surface. Because if you don't have high temperatures at the surface, then you can't really have good lapse rates regardless. Because if you look at a sounding, I'll just draw it out for you. This line is going to be our temperature line if we have some weaker temperatures at the surface. I'll split it into two here, because we don't really have the steeper temperatures at the surface. We can't get that those temperatures to be steeper in the upper levels. So with our temperatures being lower, there's only so cold that the upper atmosphere can really go. So our temperature line is going to look more like this on our soundings with lower surface-based temperatures. However, if we had higher surface-based temperatures, then we could have a steeper lapse rates line there, or steeper temperature line and more lapse rates. But because of the fact that we don't really have the best surface-based temperatures, we don't really have the best lapse rates. Taking a look at our instability and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today, we have some really nice most unstable cape across this region, with cape values mostly getting upwards into 1,000, 1,250 joules per kilogram across this region, across the slight risk region, with cape values across the rest of the marginal risk region mostly ranging around anything less than 1,000, but still supportive of some marginal severe thunderstorms. But in the slight risk region, definitely have some decent instability, so definitely going to support the possibility of some large hail. Taking a look at our surface-based instability and how this can affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, mainly our tornado risk, you can already tell that we have a substantially lower instability compared to our most unstable cape here for surface-based cape, mostly because of the lack of strong surface-based temperatures, so we don't really have the best surface-based instability, with the majority of our instability being at higher altitudes. But we do have some surface-based instability values that are ranging anywhere from the upper less than 1,000 values, so mostly around 900, 800, mostly around those regions. Is definitely not the most favorable conditions for tornadoes, but definitely not a non-zero risk for tornadoes. We could definitely see a brief weak tornado from one of these storms that may fire across this region. Another thing I wanted to look at is our surface-based convective inhibition, which I forgot to look at yesterday. However, after storms fire, there is a few-hour window where we don't really have a whole lot of convective inhibition, but there is definitely some convective inhibition, but that convective inhibition is going to strengthen as the night goes on, which is going to put a cap on the surface to prevent a whole lot of surface-based instability. And given that there's already a little bit of surface-based instability already, and it's slowly growing over time, it's definitely going to hinder our risk for tornadoes a little bit, again making it conditional. But while there is time, there is the potential for a weak brief tornado. But again, there are multiple factors at play that are just hindering our tornado risk. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how this can affect our risk for tornadoes for today, or mostly indicate our risk for tornadoes, we have some really nice energy helicity index values across this region, very indicative of the possibility for tornadoes across this region. However, if we pull up a sounding here, um, again, lower surface-based cape, our HRRR is definitely I think overperforming a bit than what we're actually going to see with our HRF being again a bit more conservative. It usually is just a bit more conservative, but you can see that we have some nice curvature in the low levels of the hodograph, very elongated hodographs with the potential for some scattered large hail across this region. Really nice instability, and again really nice shear. But then as we looked at previously. Oh, there is some convective inhibition that is causing our risk for tornadoes to be a little bit hindered. However, regardless, we do have the ingredients for tornadoes. They are here, but there are just multiple things at play that are going to hinder our risk for tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our hail swath and how that's going to indicate our risk for hail for today. As you can see, in that slight risk region, that 15% risk for hail, we do have a couple of cells that are indicated to produce hail, mainly those ones that are currently already ongoing, with the potential for hail potentially get upwards of an inch in size, either anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to potentially even upwards of an inch in this region. So again, definitely the potential for some potentially damaging hail, but scattered hail nonetheless. Taking a look at our wind gusts and how this can indicate our risk for isolated damaging wind gusts for today. As you can see, right there where our storms are, there are a couple of areas that have some isolated damaging wind gusts. Some cells potentially producing upwards of 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and even potentially upwards of 40 to 45 miles per hour in some of these cells. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description, check out the socials for GladiatorWX, and join the Discord for any updates on GladiatorWX, and hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.